Hello, it's Jim here, Vinyl Designs. It's been a while since I've posted anything, mainly because we are finishing the process of rebuilding our house and dealing with packing up and all of that stuff, and it's just been a crazy time for the last few months. We haven't moved yet, but hopefully within the next few weeks we will be in our new house and things will settle down and I'll be able to post some new videos because I have a bunch of music that I would love to talk about. But today is December 7th, which is, in addition to Pearl Harbor Day, which is Tom Waits' birthday. He's 70 years old today. And I've been a big Tom Waits fan for most of my life, and thought I would quickly go through my Tom Waits records and just talk briefly about him. I started to get into Tom Waits when I was in high school, so early 80s, I guess. But I didn't start really listening to his earlier stuff till later. I'd only heard a few things from Tom Waits as a kid. I knew Ole 55, both from his record getting played a little bit on AM radio and from the cover on the Eagles record of that song. And then there were a few other songs that would pop up over the years. That was pretty much all I knew. I just knew who he was and I knew a little bit about him. But by high school, Swordfish Trombones had come out, and that was the record that kind of, clicked me into who he was. It was also a big change for him, but I'll go through that in a minute. So I'm going to start actually with records that came out much later, like in the early 90s, I believe, 91 or so. There were two records that were the early years. These were sort of demo recordings, and that's these two records. Waits doesn't, like that these are out there. Definitely not something that he approved of, but somebody else apparently owned the rights to them, so they got put out. And it's interesting, it's very sort of folk scene, early 70s, singer-songwriter period, which is really what the first couple records, especially the first record, Closing Time, really felt like was, the kind of troubadour scene, early 70s singer-songwriter. These are the represses that Anti did of the Asylum records. This is the clear vinyl edition, and I, because I was replacing everything, I just went ahead and got that whole collection of Asylum records on the clear vinyl version. It was actually, I think, the first records that I replaced. It was the records I'd been on Waits' mailing list for forever, and when these came out, it kind of prompted me to think about starting to replace my vinyl collection. This was really early on after the fire, so these were the first records that I replaced. Closing Time was definitely a record that was not what Waits wanted it to be. He was definitely more of a kind of jazz-oriented disposition at the time, and the producer really kind of shifted and pushed it more towards the folk scene. So it has a real soft kind of folk edge to it. The second record, Heart of Saturday Night, pushed a little bit more towards the kind of jazzy sense. And then Nighthawks at the Diner. I think those first three records really kind of still feel like a folk jazz kind of sound. Again, all of these are on the clear vinyl repress. So Nighthawks at the Diner is Waite's first live record. And one of the things about Tom Waits is that he's as much a performer as he is a singer or musician. And I think at the time, the producers were thinking, you know, this is the way to capture Waits. And it really is. I mean, you know, at that time especially, you wanted to just kind of, you know, hang out and watch a, you know, kind of cabaret or jazz scene kind of club atmosphere. And that was perfect for Waits. Nighthawks is a great record. But it's, you know, again, this is all kind of, it doesn't show how special Waits is yet. That came, I think, with the next record, which was Small Change. This record, Waits really starts to sound a little bit more like the Tom Waits the mature Tom Waits. And I consider this probably the best of the Asylum records. You know, with songs like The Piano Has Been Drinking, Pasties in a G-String, Small Change. Some of the best writing he did up to that point definitely showed up on this record. Really, really, really good stuff. Again, mostly about the songwriting. The performance started to come a little bit more into it with Small Change. But musically, not really breaking any new ground yet. Foreign Affairs and Blue Valentine come along after that. And Heart Attack and Vine. I would actually put all three of those in. Although Heart Attack and Vine is starting to shift. So Foreign Affairs, you got, you know, tracks like Burma Shave that are more storytelling, which is really where Waits is going. Blue Valentine, by the way, just a little bit of trivia, that's Rickie Lee Jones on the back. He was dating her at the time. I think Blue Valentine and Heart Attack and Vine are not quite as good as Small Change. And I think he was sort of running out of steam on the singer-songwriter kind of jazz cabaret thing that he had going. It was just, I think, you know, wearing down. He was also drinking a lot. He was a pretty serious alcoholic at the time. And the relationship with Rickie Lee Jones, I think, jarred him because she was a pretty serious junkie at the time. And so he got out of that relationship and into another relationship that started here with the soundtrack to One from the Heart, where he met Kathleen Brennan during this period while working on the movie, the soundtrack for the Francis Ford Coppola film One from the Heart, which was a huge flop. But and the record, I don't see this record as being anything really special in Waits' recording career, other than meeting Kathleen Brennan, who became his wife very quickly. I think they met or started dating and got married within a week or something crazy like that. But this, so this record kind of has that significance. But it still kind of sounds a little like where he's been. I think Brennan helped him both, get sober, kind of clean up his act, and at the same time, it kind of opened him up musically. and she helped him kind of move towards what I think is the start of where Waits really contributes, not just as a songwriter, but as a musician, and that's with Swordfish Trombones. I think this is the first record where he's kind of creating a sound that is unique, not just songs that stand up, but a kind of an entirely new way of presenting his music, which is much more sort of, there's definitely a lot of Captain Beefheart that comes in, but kind of in a, I don't know, filtered through Kurt Weill, the German composer, not the new Kurt Weill, and through I don't know, just a cacophony of sound, a kind of musique concrète, using found sounds or not so much found sounds, but found experiences with sound, banging on, concrete or pipes, or percussion became a big part of the new Tom Waits sound, and that was a really cool thing, and that's where Swordfish Trombones comes from. 16 Shells from a 30-06, Johnsburg, Illinois, Frank's Wild Years. There's some great songs on here, and I think this is one of his greatest records. It's certainly a record that changed his career and changed what he was doing. The next record is actually my personal favorite of his, which is Rain Dogs. And this record is phenomenal to me personally because it was the one that, I loved Swordfish Trombones, but I have so many personal experiences related to this record, to Rain Dogs. It was just, at a time in my life where I listened to this song a lot and there were a lot of things happening. This is 1983, 84, somewhere around there. I can't remember. It's been a long time. It's 85. So this is, I believe actually what I'm looking at here is a bootleg version of this, because the Island records are incredibly difficult to get a hold of. And I think when I bought this, it was a European press, which I don't believe this is a legal pressing, but it is what I could get a hold of that was in good shape. So it is what it is. But it sounds good, so I'm happy with that. And I would love to buy a repress of that, just like I bought represses of all the Asylum years. I prefer, actually, while I'm replacing things, I prefer to buy represses because there's at least a chance that a portion of that money is going to the artist. With the Asylum represses, those are all purchased directly from Anti, which is Waits' label, and those are, I can at least be relatively confident that, a portion is going to him, which is really the fair thing. The next record was Frank's Wild Years. This was a record that meant a lot to me because it was a time in my life, 87, I had moved away from here, out to the East Coast and was really kind of disconnected from everybody out there. I didn't know anybody and I was pretty down. And my closest friend, who is my sort of compatriot when it comes to Tom Waits, we've kind of grown up listening to him together. He sent me a copy of Frank's Wild Years when it came out, And it just meant a lot to me to kind of make that connection, and to kind of, everything about the record, I think of him and I think of that time, and it just meant a lot to me to kind of have that friendship, even at a distance, kind of continue. And so that was, that's what this record means to me. This one is an original. The cover's kind of beat up, but it is an original Island pressing. So I haven't been able to get, new presses of a lot of these things, especially the Island records. Most of these are, old. Big Time was a live performance that Waits did, that was captured in a film, a portion of it. It wasn't the complete performance. That actually goes to something about Tom Waits that I should say is that I've never been able to see Tom Waits perform live. I've always wanted to. I've always been in the wrong place. He doesn't do shows very often. When he performed on the West Coast, I was on the East Coast, and vice versa, and just have never been able to line up, seeing him with knowing about the show or being able to see the show. And it's always driven me crazy. It's the one artist that I've always desperately wanted to see live and have never been able to. He happens to live just down the road, near us here in Sonoma County, and so I've run into him several times. I've stopped and chatted with him before, and but I've just never seen him perform. So someday I hope to have that chance. In fact, I go to these shows at Lagunitas Brewery in Petaluma on a fairly regular basis, and I didn't go to the Mavis Staples show a couple of years ago. I just missed it. I just didn't know it was happening. And they're free shows, which is the worst part of this story. And he showed up and did a performance with her, and that drives me really crazy. Anyways, but I'm just going to kind of go quickly through the rest. Soundtrack to Night on Earth, the Jim Jarmusch film. He did a lot of work with Jim Jarmusch in the 80s, and this is into the 90s. Bone Machine. I love Waits' work in the 90s. Bone Machine, Black Rider, Mule Variations, and really those three. Bone Machine, Black Rider, and Mule Variations have a phenomenal sound. It's like a really mature sound for Waits. Very kind of rough blues, very centered on percussion and kind of, I don't know how strangled vocals. There's so many descriptions of Waits' vocals because they're distinct. But great stuff. And then into the late 90s and early 2000s, we go with Alice and Blood Money, which are of a set, really. They came out together, and they're I believe, two parts of the Alice work that he did with, trying to remember the composer's name, or the director's name. It was a performance. Of course, I didn't see that. I believe it was in Germany. Then we go to Real Gone. Brawlers, Ballers, and Bastards, which is the triple, double, so they're double LPs, and there's a triple LP set, so there's 6 records. And this period, there's some great tracks on here, but I did think that with this amount of music, I thought that it was hit and miss for me. There were some good, some not so good. That's followed with the last few, which are Glitter and Doom Live. So this is a live record from 2009, I believe. This is a kind of retrospective show, something I would have loved to have seen, but all kind of filtered through a newer approach with Waits, a kind of a more stripped down, rougher approach on the music than even the music in the first time around. And then Waits' last studio record, which is 2011, I believe, which is Bad As Me. Another great record. I don't know if this will be the last studio record we see from Tom Waits, but this was 2011, so it's been 8 years, and we haven't seen another record. I think, as far as I remember, that's the longest stretch that he's ever gone without producing a record. So I'm not sure what we've got in store for us, but that may be the end. I hope not. And then the last batch that I have here is actually unofficial recordings. So I have Tom Waits at KPFK in 1974. Next is Live at My Father's Place, 1977. So this is another live double LP. These are all really great recordings because they were off the board. They're live. They were produced as a live show for radio. So the production quality is great. I think pretty much on all of these recordings, that's the case. None of these are like, audience recordings or anything like that. The next is Live at the Bottom Line in 1976. So this is a New York recording from 76. And then we jump to 79 in Sydney, Cold Beer on a Hot Night, Sydney broadcast from 1979. Good recording. I'm trying to be quick here. I'm sorry, there's way too many records. And then the last recording is really, this is a double set from 1989. This is On the Line in 89, volumes 1 and 2, volume 1 and volume 2. They look the same. And this is in Italy, I believe, in Florence, Italy. Again, a radio broadcast there, a pretty long show, basically 4 records, 8 sides. So this would have been in the big time performance time frame. And a great recording, really, really nice. So glad to have these live recordings because I've never been able to actually see them live. But that's as close as I've gotten. And then the last record I have, I actually just picked up last week, which is the Coming Up to the House, Women Sing Waits. And this is a cover album. And I haven't had a chance to listen to the whole thing. I've listened to a few tracks. But it's got, Amy Mann, Patty Griffin, Roseanne Cash, Iris DeMent. So it's got some great people on this, covering, Old 55 and Ruby's Arms, Jersey Girl, Downtown Train. So there's some good stuff in here. I'm looking forward to listening to the whole thing. And I love this project. And just on a personal note, during this process where we're trying to get back into the house, this Waits track has just not left my mind for like 3 weeks. Coming up to the house. Just can't get it out of there. Anyways. So I have a million Tom Waits stories, but this is just ridiculously long. And there you go. Happy birthday, Tom. 70 years. I've loved your music for, 35, almost 40 years. I guess, 40 years. So, yeah, thanks. And thank you for watching. If you got this far into this video, thanks for taking the time, and I will try and post some things again as soon as I'm able to. Take care, everyone.